on August 20th, 2005, there was nothing left of me. I had gone for 43 years trying to fix something that was unfixable. And in the end, at that point, I really wanted. Am I going too much to the future?
No, I mean, I think it's, I mean, it's important to denote how long that you were in the dark, and how long you were
Oh, oh, that was the point. Yeah.
how long you were in denial. We don't know what we don't know. How long that sometimes it's funny when we talk about substance abuse or alcoholism. We'll talk to people in recovery, and even for myself, that your alcoholic life seems the only normal one. You've gotten so used to this cycle of numbing the pain of your life through substances that it becomes the only normal one. And to sit here with somebody who was in a relationship from early flags in dating, but then having four children and a 43-year marriage, that this was a long run of denial for you.
Yeah, and Charlie, I think and it's not just me, but a number of women that we talked to, I never thought I was suffering from domestic violence. I was always taught that if I prayed hard enough and if I worked hard enough, I could change. I could I could change the situation. But I think I learned that it's good to pray and it's good to ask for things, but in the end, it has to be you that opens the door and leave. No one's going to open the door and say you're suffering domestic violence. You have to leave. So at that point, I was 65 years old, and I was suffering from domestic violence and also post-traumatic stress disorder. That I was ready to end my life in order to get rid of the pain. And so I praise God that I chose not to take my life that day.
Yeah, and how if you could just share a little bit about how the control progressed. I mean, you talked a little bit about those early warning signs, but those early warning signs, those red flags got bright red, and there were a lot more of them. And I think you talked eloquently about just peace at any cost, and denying the reality of what was happening around you as you look back now through your new pair of glasses at that life. What were the kind of the progressions of domestic violence for you that you would really alert other sufferers to?
Manipulation. And I just felt like raising my children, I couldn't raise them the way I wanted to. It had to be just his way or the highway. You know, he was demanding of how I have a full pages of all of absolutes that we lived with in order not to have him explode. And none of them to try to prevent any of them was impossible because there was no warning sign. Anything could, a fork put the wrong way, or a kid coming late for dinner, or just any minor thing could cause an explosion, as you well know, Charlie.
Yeah, and let's talk about the trauma part of it. You said you suffered from post traumatic stress. I mean, trauma, are these effects, and people think of trauma in different ways, but there you are, a mother, you've got four kids. You talk about raising your four kids and not being able to raise them the way you wanted to. How did as we dig into this, I mean, we're gonna get into that part of just as a mother not being able to protect your kids from what ended up to be not just control and manipulation, but the violent part of domestic violence,
Mm-hmm.
really took hold in our house. I mean, this was not just, picking out the wrong dishes and being angry about aspirin. Ultimately, this progressed into, violent and physical abuse at the hands of an overpowering man in your own home. And, that must have been, as a mother, having that, desire to protect your cubs, and then seeing this happening, you must have felt a bit powerless.
It was, Charlie. And I think it's a really important message I'd like to give today to anyone that's watching and listening. I was the person in that family that was there to protect my children. And yes, I was in a bad situation. And yes, things were, I couldn't control. I didn't realize I could control. I didn't realize I could walk out the door. I realized, I just hoped that tomorrow would be better. And so it was a very difficult session I had with my therapist about saying, yes, it was difficult. Yes, it was hard, but I made some poor choices, and I didn't take responsibility for my children at that point. And and I think just explaining that to my children that I know I could have done things different. At that point, I was in fear, power control, and ultimate denial. But at least I still admit that there was a part of me that could have done something and didn't. And I wanted my kids to know that I didn't take that lightly. That I didn't brush it off. That I I I will. Sorry, that's important. I think it's something that's important in our relationship, Charlie. You felt when I took that responsibility, it made a difference in our relationship.
Yeah, I think as children growing up with a parent who's a victim of domestic violence, there's the child's view of it, and as a child, I think what we all need is validation, and we all need to be accepted. And there was this narrative that either nothing was wrong, it wasn't bad as you thought it was, or somehow I did the best I could, and well, there's an element of truth to all of that, but at the end of the day, um,
Mhm.
you were responsible to protect your kids and you didn't, and that's just a fact that you've acknowledged and admitted. And I think it, as hard as it is to have that conversation as a child of domestic violence and violent abuse, at least it validates what happened to you, and at least you can heal from that. It's like the lie, just the lie and the dismissal and the minimization of it just makes the pain even harder, because now you're trying to rationalize, well, so, I know this wasn't happening to my friends, and I'm sure for you,
Mhm.
trying to make your family seem as normal as you could, was important. And, maybe if you could talk a little bit about that external appearance, that facade that you had to keep up. I know, for a lot of people that either the concern about what other people think or that need to create an image keeps people trapped. And I know it kept you trapped, and kept
Mhm.
all of us trapped in this kind of prison of, what happens in this house stays in this house. I've learned, the primary rules of a dysfunctional family are don't ask, don't talk, don't tell, don't feel. And we sure live by all of those. But you felt a certain obligation to have an appearance. I mean, I can remember keeping the house a certain way, and when guests would come over, or company would come over, as we called it back then, that there was that whatever was happening in our house, you had to put a certain paintbrush on. Is that accurate?
Yeah, it's very accurate. And you know what's even more accurate? I had a former colleague come today to pick up some things I wanted to share with her. And we had coffee and we were talking. And she was a graduate student at the university. And she said, "You probably don't remember, but at the end of the class, Charlie invited us all to your home for, a celebration." And she said, "I remember observing you bringing out the appetizers, serving the guests." And she said, "And just I saw in the corner of my eye the way he talked to you and like demanding you, why haven't you done this?" And she said, "Is that woman a slave or his wife?" Now this is today that I just heard that.
Wow.
And 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 that was it was like black and white how we could no one knew. That was no one knew the hell on earth that we were living. And we could change it on a dime. Um, that I remember we used to have these couples that came and we'd had a big fight before they came. And they're pulling in the driveway and then he'd say to me, "Do you love me?" And I'd say, "Oh yes, I love you." And he said, "Are you done with your ship?" And I said, "I'm done with your ship." Yeah. And then he said, "I don't have to be nice. These are your flanking friends." Okay, they get out of the car and whammo, it smiles. "Hi, how are you?" That's a small example of what your life and the life of your brothers and sisters and me were. And someone said that they were more on guard when they had company. Well, I kind of relaxed. It's like we knew we were safe and that he wasn't going to make any do anything rude or whatever in front of people. But yet, here I just heard today that someone saw him the way he talked to me and demanded stuff of me. So, um, and another example would be we had a gravel driveway, and as soon as we hear his car driving, the kids would all scatter. And but just that no one knew. Everyone was shocked. Like we were this perfect Catholic family. go to mass every Sunday, and the kids all in a row and all, but it was hell on earth. And I now live in a peaceful heaven on earth.
Yeah, well, it's important. So the I think there's a principle of honesty that runs a
Hmm.
thread through most people's lives, and I think when people talk about the importance of that principle, it's learned, and we all have a desire to be honest, but you taught a lesson of deceit, and you taught a lesson, and it was for survival. I mean, we have these coping skills, but I think what's lost on people is how ingrained these survival skills become, and you can't just turn them off. I mean, I've at least for me, the dishonesty that I learned about what was happening at home bled into all other aspects of my life where I learned to lie about who I was and actually couldn't get to know myself. I mean, you'd been living a pretty powerful lie for almost 43 years. I mean, and I know everybody that's come on this podcast that has overcome anything in their lives to a person has all emphasized the importance of asking for help, and that you're not alone. I think it's so amazing that you and Patricia McLean now have started finding our voices to where you're actually taking your mess, as you would say, and turned it into your miracle, and showing how what you went through is able to help other people. But can you maybe shed a light a little bit on the importance of people being true to themselves, and how they can how they can find themselves in the midst of this chaos? Because I mean, you literally create this facade. You're like an actress. You're putting on a show, and it's not representative of reality, but you become pretty much an Academy Award winning actress in presenting and
Yeah,
displaying
I was thinking
deception.
of what you were saying, just to discuss it. In fact, uh, when I came to California for 2 weeks at Charles' house, I ended up staying a year. And one of my friends said, when the Academy Awards came out, they said, "How come you weren't there?" I said, "What are you talking about?" They said, "Well, you should have gotten the Academy Award for how you were able to disguise what was happening." But Charlie, that's the key to the whole thing. And living in denial, I didn't have to admit to anything. But once I came to the point where I just put a little crack into denial, and when I finally left and I was with a therapist, I made the decision. I never was honest with the therapist. I just, as soon as it got tough and they were telling me to do something that might be disruptive to my normal life, I would flee. And that was the first thing I did to commit to myself, to be honest, to step out of that triangle of being a victim and a rescuer. I stepped out of that triangle and said, "No, Mary Lou, we're going to live in the truth. We're going to face the truth, and we're going to let other people know the truth too." And so I think that's part of the reason why it's my passion. My passion is to help one person I may never know, even abusive relationship. But the foundation of it is when you get to go for help, that you face it with honesty.